All right, the Hangout is on air. The Hangout on air is live. And we are here on July the 7th to talk about interactive notebooks. And we have a bunch of experts and inquirers today. I'm Laura Sexton. I have a blog, PBL in the TL, and I have tinkered with interactive notebooks, but I don't really know what I'm doing yet. I rely mostly on the wisdom of Rosalind Rhodes, who did a presentation at Flank, and I linked to her blog in the little Hangout things earlier. And I'll add her blog post to the Google community shortly. So let's introduce everybody else too. I see Sarah Elizabeth next.
I am Sarah Elizabeth Cottrell, the blogger at MissQuintos.com, and I think interactive notebooks might be a good way for me to handle a very unusual situation that I'll have this fall, where I'll be meeting with students once a week on Fridays and leaving them on their own for the rest of the week in very small classes with unknown tech availability, and so I'm interested to see how interactive notebooks might be able to serve them.
Sounds good. And I believe Rachel is from my home state.
Yes. Do I need to click anything or? um, I've been using interactive notebooks for about a year and it's worked really well, except that I have absolutely no organization. So I'm trying to improve on that and hopefully come at it this year with an idea of what I'm actually going to do before I do it.
Okay, got Rachel, and then we have Ms. Myra, who I don't know. Have you already worked with interactive notebooks, or are you looking to experiment too?
I'm looking more to experiment, although I've downloaded a few things. And I had a teacher actually talk to me one-on-one, and she uses them. And so she showed me just right there. I said, well, how do you make the fold? See, the problem is the folds, right? I'm not really into folding. You know, I can fold a couple airplanes and throw them across the room. But so I've done a couple things in that. I've taken like some interactive notebooks here, not notebooks, composition books, and just started experimenting with making the folds without taking separate pieces of paper and then gluing the paper in there, because I think that's kind of beyond the point. I mean, they already have the notebook, so why put extra paper in there? So I was just trying to think, you know, it's always good to have a backup, and that is, how about if I just made a couple of folds here straight in the paper, and then you could put in this is just like a paper airplane kind of thing. But the thing that it's cool about it is that it kind of is over the top of this, so it makes a tab, and you could put a tab like, this is my notes on whatever subject we're doing. And so that's what I'm experimenting with, and just knowing, hey, you know, this could work, and I'm not the most organized person either, and neither are my kids. So that's my deal.
That sounds kind of advanced to me. Like my favorite fold is you fold over one and then you glue the bottom and the side and you have a pocket. That's about as advanced as I get.
Like things like pockets are cool, and I think once you start getting rolling with that, what I would like to do is have kids actually come up with the folds, because they're pretty easy. I mean, in 6th grade, what they're doing is they're making folds such that they have all these long fingernails or fingertips, right, like a robot. They do that in 6th grade. Some of the kids know how to do that, and so I'm thinking, well, why not do something that's educational, and then you're allowed to do that. So I would give it to the kids and say, hey, you know, how would I fold this so I can get this? And that's, I think, what I like about it. And then the other thing that I did this year that was different was that I'm teaching heritage speakers. So that's a little bit different than your normal Spanish 1, Spanish 2 class that I've been used to. And so that's where I thought maybe the interactive notebooks would be better, because they are more of like an English language and history is what I've seen on the internet that people sell. So that's kind of where I came up with it.
And I like the folding things too. I believe you mentioned that to me before, but Luz Ramirez, I think, was talking last night in our PBL one about how she had him doing hazlo tú mismo, like a do-it-yourself kind of thing with origami folds and stuff. And so, you know, blend that all together, and then maybe like the heritage speakers could do something. We got some more introductions to make. Next in my order, I see Ms. Marquetta. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Marquetta. Hey, guys.
Hello. But have you done anything with interactive notebooks so far?
Yes, this past school year, last August, a friend of mine taught middle school, and I was helping her do some stuff in July, and she's like, "Hey, do this thing called interactive notebooks." I'm like, "Oh, what's that?" And then I went on Pinterest and I saw they had it for Spanish, and I was like, "I have to try this." Now, this is 2 weeks before school started. I'm one of those that I'm like, "Sure, I'll just, if it doesn't work, at December we'll do something different." And what was also neat is that I had a new, well, in our hallway we call each other neighbors. I had a new neighbor who came in that replaced a good friend of mine, and for 2 years she'd been doing interactive notebooks for world geography, and I was like, oh my gosh! And so she gave me like a ton of like foldable templates and everything, and so she kind of helped me for this past school year with the whole interactive notebooks. Oh, I'm sorry, I teach high school Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. Forgot to tell you guys that. But yeah, my students thought it was the best thing ever because I'm like, hey guys, we're not doing binders. Everything that we're doing is going to be in this notebook right here. We're gluing it all, pasting it all, and then they're fine with it. They thought it was like the best thing ever.
I think my kids are a little bit interactive notebooked out because it is like the Bible of the math classes, and
Oh,
and
see,
so
there's
they're
not
like,
teachers at my school that's doing it. It's me and the world geography teacher. So they're like, oh, this is the coolest thing.
yeah. I think it's cool, and I think they thought it was cool at first. They're like, now can we do something that's not a foldable? But I don't know much about the foldables, so I would like to hear more about that in a little bit. We got two more people to introduce. Miss Christina.
Hi, I teach Spanish from pre-K through fifth grade, so it's the little ones. I've used interactive notebooks mostly with, I guess, my second grade, and this year I had Spanish speakers. They love it. They love to get every paper that I hand them, they glue them, they fold them. The only thing that I would recommend is to pre-cut it, especially the margins, so it fits in the notebook. Because if you're going to have them cut and paste, you're going to waste a lot of time doing that. So if you pre-cut it and then they know, I just tell them where, like draw a line and say you just put glue across the line and that's it, and it works a lot better that way.
I agree, and like even when it's pre-cut, they still want to trim it, and it takes forever. So the more you can save of your class time, I think the better. All right, and one last introductions, Miss Barbara.
Hi, I teach high school Spanish, 4 and 5, and this year I'm going to be going back to teach level 1. So I'm looking for something that's going to be more hands-on for them, and I think this would be a perfect. I taught middle school years and years ago, and I remember that learning style, you need something that's more hands-on and more keeping them more occupied. And I love technology. I'm a tech coach here at the high school as well, but not all of our kids always have access to that outside of school. So I want to give them something that when they leave the room, they're going to have it with them when they go.
That's interesting. So you do let your kids take their interactive notebooks home?
Well, I don't know. I'm looking at tools. I'm thinking about what would be something that they could use to take with them. We'll see. I'm actually co-teaching level 1, so I'm interested to find out things to take to my co-teacher tomorrow to see what her thoughts are.
I hadn't thought about it as something you would purposely keep in the room with you. I was thinking that it would be a good tool for them to be able to have with them, especially in my situation where they're going to be away from me quite a bit, to be able to review it when they're away, or even interact with it in other days. So it could be almost like a homework assignment where their assignment is to revisit their conversation that they put together with the conversation bubbles or whatever. And I'm totally new at this. Except I'm homeschooling, so my little girl's doing one on pioneers, and so that's all I know about interactive notebooks. But that they could put it together and then find a new person every day to practice that conversation with from their interactive notebook.
That'd be cool. One of the things one way I look at the interactive notebooks is as a replacement for textbooks, because I haven't used a textbook in I don't know how long, and so they always were like, oh well, how am I supposed to study? What am I supposed to look at? It's like, well, this is what you look at. However, like for my gurus, like because like Marquetta, it was the week before school started. It was like during our work days, and we had a teaching and learning conference in my district, and I started interactive notebooks. It's like, oh, now I'm doing that, okay, and hence the experimental thing. And so like I just kind of threw it out there, and those people were my gurus, and they said they don't let them leave their room. They have a little box. They stay there always. Now, of course, they saw their kids every day, so it wasn't a situation where they would need to take it with them. So mine have been staying in my room, and what I've been doing, not so religiously, is taking a picture of an example page each time we do one and uploading it to Evernote. They never check it, so I don't know if I'm going to keep doing that. But I have that as if they want to use that to study. But from my point of view, they're getting it the most out of it is not reviewing it, and we'll be talking about that with Make It Stick, right, Sarah Elizabeth? Is the actual processing of the information as part of the notebook. Mm-hmm. So like they're taking it with them anyway because they have processed it an extra step in their head. So it's not because like as we've been reading Make It Stick, it doesn't stick by just reviewing it. You have to do something with it, and so they have already done something with it. Yeah. So any other final comments or goals, or should we get into what an interactive notebook is?
Ready.
All right. So what goes in an interactive notebook? What do you think?
Well, one of the ways I use it is with like reading comprehension. Like there's one actually I got from I think it was Teachers Pay Teachers. It has like the title, book title, like the characters in the story. It's like with little flaps. So they glue it, they lift it up, and then they answer underneath. And that's like really fun for them to do. So that's one way of using it.
So definitely interpretive exercises.
Yes.
Now, here's something I've wondered about. Do you put the actual text in the notebook with them so they can review that, or just the comprehension evidence?
No, it's just basically the comprehension evidence. That's how I've used it.
Okay. And what kind of text were they interpreting?
Kind of like a short story that we read. I have a lot of these PowerPoint presentations that I do in class, and we read them together, we discuss them, we interact with them, and then later we work on the notebook.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I see Myra is showing us an example. Myra, you're going to have to unmute and talk so it'll show up as a main screen.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to do this all and making sure I'm not doing something wrong here. But this is what Christina was talking about. And this is right off of Teachers Pay Teachers. I went on, I purchased this particular document. So I don't want to show you everything because that would be copyright violation. But this is kind of what they're talking about, is that what you see is you have this flap. And on the flap, the kids cut that out from the pre-printed sheet of paper. They color it in maybe, and then they glue it down only with dots. That's what I'm reading too. You just do dots, no glue sticks. And then they glue it in there, and underneath this particular example is where they would write their response. So that's the way this one works. If you can, I hope you can see it right, because I think it's actually two different things on top of each other.
What's the opposition to glue sticks? Because I already put glue sticks on my supply form. Ha!
Well, now I'm going just for what I'm reading, and what I'm reading is that it doesn't work as well. So that's what the experts are saying. So I'm just going on Pinterest or whatever, or all I'm doing is I'm going to YouTube and I'm watching people talk about instructions for interactive notebooks to their kids, to their students. So that's what I'm doing. And so it's almost like you're supposed to strudel it too, when you have a bigger page or whatever. So I don't know what to tell you about that, but I think it's stronger and it sticks. Or if you get too much glue, they just kind of lift off, and maybe that's what the glue stick does. I would have to ask an expert, like a kindergarten teacher or something.
Yeah,
like that.
well, we use glue sticks all the time, because the other type of glue, basically, they make a mess. I mean, I know you're supposed to ask them to just a little dot, but the glue sticks work perfectly.
Gotcha.
Myra, what you were talking about, were you talking about actual glue dots, like the ones that come on the strip and it's just a little dot and you peel it off and stick it on, or like Elmer's liquid glue?
No, it's the liquid glue, but the instructions to the students are such that you just do like Dippin' Dots, Or if you have a bigger piece of paper, the instructions that teachers give that have been successful is going back and forth like a strudel.
Okay.
and
See,
doing that
when
for
you said glue dots, I'm thinking like, kids with crafts, and you buy those
oh
strips
yeah,
that have just little dots on them, and they stick the little dots on, because that might work too.
I know
that's
for me
true.
and my
That would
high
work.
school kids with glue, at first I started using glue sticks, but I mean, I have 140 kids, I mean, and they're just going through glue sticks like night and day. So what I did, I went to Office Depot and bought the giant, I think it's like 8 gallons, that giant, or it might be 2 gallons of glue. And I had 3 glue bottles, and we would just refill that, and I still have half a gallon of glue left. So if you want to use glue sticks, I've used that and that was fine. But for my high school kids, and we went through the whole glue tutorial. I'm like, all right, guys. I'm like, I don't want a racetrack of glue. I just need a couple of, and they'll govern themselves. As funny as it sounds, the high school kids will govern themselves on your glue usage. Like they'll call you out in a quick second. They're like, Miss Parker, she's using too much glue. And so I mean, for my high school kids, we had to go over glue etiquette, as in like, don't put too much glue, and then also we're not in kindergarten, so please don't put the glue all over your hands and start peeling it off, because they're like, oh, this reminds me of kindergarten. I'm like, guys, stop it, you're wasting the glue. So that's what I've done. I've tried both stick glue and white glue, and I'm right now I'm staying on the white glue because it was just cheaper that way, and so that way we didn't go through a million glue sticks by 7th hour. So yeah.
I use
And
glue sticks, but I teach 12th graders, and so they already have their preferences, and they're very picky, and some of them bring their own glue. And I'm like, that's fine. You
Yeah.
can have glue freedom, but I just provide the glue sticks, and it seems to work okay.
but I use glue sticks, and things do tend to fall off a lot, or they do go through them like in no time
Water.
flat. And my kids beg for tape. So
Yes, I've had a few do that. Yeah. The clear packing tape, I have a few. They're like, can I bring my own tape? I'm like, that's fine as long as, you don't get in trouble with it. I'm good.
yeah, we're talking about glue in the summertime. We are such teachers.
I know.
We're awesome. Okay, so different kinds of glue go in the notebooks. We have reading comprehension activities in the notebooks. What else goes in an interactive notebook?
I sometimes use my notebooks for actual interactive activities, student to student. Sometimes they do surveys, so they'll paste in, like if it's a completely new structure we're learning, they'll paste in maybe parts of the sentence, and then they have to go interview their classmates in Spanish to fill them in.
That's a good idea. Sorry.
And so yeah, it's kind of like, I like the notebook too because they can carry it around and write in it. It's not like, well, I use composition books, so it's not as difficult if they were carrying around like a 3-hole punch binder. So try to get them interacting with it.
I feel like I'm ahead of the game because I already told them that a Mead composition notebook was required, and that's been one of my required school supplies for the last 8 years. So maybe I was onto something that I didn't even know about. But another thing I was thinking that came into my head thinking about what to do with it was to try to speed things up, because I'm going to have a lot of things that I want to accomplish in a short amount of time that I want them to be able to interact with later. So to give them the components of a conversation, so lots of different questions and potential answers, or maybe leave out the potential answers, but put all the potential questions in there and have them choose, which 3 or 4 they want to ask at the time, and then talk amongst each other and go around with their notebooks like you were talking about, recording the answer, and then maybe do something else during the week with the other potential questions, maybe something like that as an interpersonal task.
2 things that made me think of. One is one of the greetings foldables that I've seen. Hold on. 1 moment. Tell us about, guys. Sorry. So they have a greetings one where they have a cute little foldable that has flaps on it, and so like it has hola, and then you open the flap, and then what the other person's supposed to say to it, and then and they usually like the hola, the first part might be printed, and then they could just write in what they want to say in response underneath. I really like greetings. Another made me think of it is my guru the week before started last year told me that they one side, and I've seen this on most of the Pinterest things, one side is for teacher input and one side is for student output, like for them to process it, either with like graphic organizers, doodles, whatever they want to do. I haven't quite mastered that either, but like if you have your input side for the conversational pieces on, say, the right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side you could have them do whole different conversations. One thing I was thinking to have them do is do little stickman cartoons, making up their own conversations, recombining the stuff and making it and putting it in their own visuals, like to make some visual connections.
I've done that. That's how I do some of my grammar, my vocab, is that we'll go over the grammar stuff on the teacher side, and I'll say, okay, guys, on the left-hand side, you put it in your own words by drawing or whatnot. And I've had some success with a lot of them doing it. Others are kind of like, I don't know what to put. I'm like, in your own, I'm like, in English, it's fine. Put it in your own words to describe this grammar to you. And so some get it and they just run with it, and others are still kind of afraid of like, oh, I get to give my own opinion. I'm like, yes, this whole left side. Just tell me what you want, however it clicks in your brain, that's fine.
Now, Mark.
Oh, wait, you shorted out.
Sorry. I clicked the unmute button too many times. Do you do that with everything, or do you do that with just like grammar concepts, or?
I usually write this past year just like with grammar concepts. Yeah, mainly because usually if we go over like strict grammar on the right-hand side, I might have them do a foldable on the left-hand side. Like we might do like a flat book foldable or a smush or something. And also the way I live in Louisiana, so I'll say parish, but you guys have counties or districts. The way that our parish works is that in the summertime we have a whole bunch of tech classes that are available, and one tech class that I took was called Print, Cut, and Fold. And the teacher for that class gave us like a giant file of foldables that she shared with us. Later on after this, I'll see if I can share it with you guys, because I believe the stuff that she shared with us, the copyright is expired, so it wouldn't be copyright infringement. But yeah, but after this is over, I'll upload it, and it was just, it's like 200 plus foldables, just different ways, and you have the foldables that you can glue in your notebook. We also just have like the freestanding foldables, and so it's a really neat thing. So I'll upload that this afternoon when we get finished.
Great. And if anyone does have any resources, like Myra, you had some videos, if you could post those to our Google community under the interactive notebooks thing, that would be a great way for us to continue sharing ideas and teaching ourselves and each other. So yeah. So we've got grammar in the interactive notebooks too. Are we talking like standard conjugation chart kind of things, or do you do it a different way because it's interactive?
This year I'm going to do it a different way because the way that we do our foreign language is the traditional way, which this year I joke and say I'm going rogue. Like I'm breaking free, I'm going rogue, I'm trying totally different things. That's why I've been following you guys, like listening to how I want it to be more proficiency based, because I do have those kids that make an A, but some of them, they can work the language, others can't. They're just good test takers. They're good at memorizing vocab and knowing how to do the grammar. And so that's what I'm transitioning to this year, is in my interactive notebooks, for it to be more than just vocab and grammar, but more, proficiency type exercises. That's why I'm grateful of stumbling upon you guys and seeing these different hangouts and these different topics. So that way it kind of gives me a general idea, because where I'm from, even whenever I was in high school, I teach in the same parish I went to school in. We've been taught Spanish and French the same way, grammar, vocab, test, that's it. And so it's different, and I'm excited about breaking the mold, but I'm kind of like, okay, let's see what happens. The kids will like it because it's more than just, defining the 50 million words, and so, yeah. And if I tend to dominate the conversation, y'all stop me.
Hi, everybody. I didn't know if I just joined in kind of late, but I do have a interactive notebook for all 3 levels that I used last year. And since I just retired and I'm not sure who my replacement's going to be, I kind of wanted to hear your ideas so I could tweak the interactive notebook that I have here. And I heard some really great ideas about foldables on the left side. And I have an example, and I just kind of want to show it to you and see what you think about having the foldables on the left side and then introducing that material and having the kids work through it on the right side. So that I kind of followed that plan. So I'm hoping to hear back from some of you. So I'm trying to think if I'm going to try sometime here to show you a picture of it. So help work with me. Thanks.
The idea of flaps is intriguing to me at the moment, thinking about how to interact with vocabulary, because one thing that we're trying to do a lot with the VIF program development is to stay away from tying the words to their translation. So instead of just saying this means this and this means this, we have kids either we'll link it to a Google image search to see if they can infer what the meaning is, and then also have them illustrate words themselves. So once they come up with the meaning, trying to tie the word to the concept, which is based in brain research, rather than to keep it tied to the English word. Anyway, so I'm thinking about the flaps and having the Spanish words on the outside.
And then the picture on
And
it.
and then have them lift the flap, and then they can have their own illustration underneath the flap. And so that's something that they can do the whole week while they're away from me, is go through and see how much they can improve calling that image to mind without having to lift the flap. And so they're developing those really strong vocabulary bonds without tying it to English, maybe.
I wonder about putting maybe the image on the outside to see if they can recall the word, because if the
Ooh,
point
that's
is
a good one. I
Yeah.
thought about doing that.
And one thing I've had them do with the visuals in their notebooks is before my beloved Infused Learning went kaput, like I had them doodle what they wanted to do for like their hobbies for one of their unit, and so like I took the best doodle representing the most common hobbies, and like I put them on a document, printed that out, and they put it in their book, and then they wrote the words next to them. Now they were not entirely satisfied with how that worked, but as I've been reading Make It Stick, I was wondering if maybe if they could just put like another letter as a hint, because one thing that's suggested in there is the using just hints to fill in the quizzing thing to get your brain on the right track, rather than just rereading notes, rereading like the same words and making the connections that way. Like if they could do it with a visual, maybe a letter, and then go from there. And there are cool foldables that you could do multiple layers of that as well. I don't know how fancy you'd want to get, but
I could see that. It's crazy how interconnected everything is in your brain with vocabulary, where yes, the image works, but then also you may have words that start with similar sounds tied closely together, or that end with the same sound tied closely together, and so anything that's similar about a word can call the other word up to your brain more quickly, and that's why you misspeak and say, oh, I didn't mean to say bubble, I meant to say trouble. And so just it's fascinating. Pretty much any connections that you can try to get them to make within the words are probably helpful to get them to recall the words faster, if that makes any sense.
Okay, so we've got reading comprehension, grammar, vocabulary. Do we have any, and we did a little bit of the interpersonal with the surveys that Rachel mentioned.
Here's if I can jump in here, as you were talking about vocabulary, because the way I like to teach vocabulary is in sentences, and then the best way to teach the sentences is in a story format so they remember it. So they're not just saying pantalones, pants. We want them to say something that's more proficiency based, is what we keep talking about. So as you were talking, I was thinking, well, how could you actually have them with this interactive notebook? Just simply make a flap. Take the piece of paper like this. You can hardly see it because I move it back and forth too fast here, but I have to hold it in front of my face. So all you do is you just take a piece of paper and you fold it. You just fold it in half, just like this, right in the notebook, right? Okay. And so if you were to draw a picture sequence on there and then cut each one of those just like this with a pair of scissors, then you would have the flaps straight in the notebook, and then the kids would retell the pictures, and then underneath they would have the text to see if they're right. So that's what Sarah was saying, is like, how can I have them review the vocabulary? So that's one way I've actually used without the interactive notebook, but I've used it just with these sheets of paper, in that they just cut them apart. And so you could do a lot of that kind of stuff where you didn't have to have it pre-made as a teacher and copied it, but you would just have them like the flashcards. You know, the other thing you could do would be just flashing them back and forth if you're going to test yourself. And like I say, have them not do just one word, but try them with more of a sentence, like a full, complete sentence or a command or something like that.
Yeah, you could totally mix up the targets and still have it patterned, which is my big thing is pattern. I don't have the time. Pattern it, right? And so it could be the cat is on top of the chair, the cat is under the desk, the cat is next to the vase or whatever. You're thinking of still putting it in highly contextualized sentences that they can illustrate, but calling up separate vocabulary structures and asking them to interact with it instead of just doing one word at a time.
Yeah, you know, in the way I look at things is that if you're going to have somebody do the cat is on top of the table, I would probably teach something like the cat is on top of the table because there's food, you know, or like my child left food like cereal or milk, a bowl of milk on top of it. So when you're doing is you're increasing their academic language by giving them those sentence structures such that they just fill it in. And so if you had that, you could say, here's the cat on top of it. And I know traditionally what we try to do is like the cat is on top, the cat is on bottom, but then that kind of never really comes into it when you're, you know, actually traveling. You know, you're like, yeah, the only thing that happened is like, where's my wallet? Is it on top of my backpack? In my backpack? Is it on my bed? I mean, maybe I'll say that to myself. But if I'm looking for my wallet, somebody will ask me, well, why are you looking for your wallet? Well, I think I lost it, or when's the last time you used it? And so that's where you get kids more proficiency-based, where they can stream a couple sentences together of why they're looking for something, or those types of things is what I'm trying to get them in these type of sentence strips where there's some kind of reason why they're doing it. And so you could probably, you know, like you've probably seen the I can statements with the little stamps they do in Kentucky. Sarah, I think you're familiar with the layout for that. And you could do the same thing with this, is you could have them draw a circle and say I can. And then on the bottom of it, or the flap would be, is they actually write that out if it happens to be a written prompt. It could also be an oral prompt as well, but they can write it out. And then see, can you introduce yourself? Well, on the bottom there, I can. So you just kind of check it off, or you stamp it. There's another use, maybe.
One thing I've done that's a little bit more complex that this still gets the stories in there is, like, I've made my little stories that relate to their unit, my little TPRS attempted stories, and I printed out with blanks. So, like, they have blanks where the main structures would go, and also, like, the things that they chose, like when they named the character Chupacabra or whatever, and like, we go through that, and they fill it in kind of like a close. And so, like, I just have it printed out as the close, and they fold it over, and it's a little book within their notebook, and it's probably not accessing the information as much, but they have a reference, and they do go back to that when they're trying to figure out their vocabulary, when they're trying to say something, and they're like, I saw that in the story, and they open that back up. I think it might be better for the lower levels to break it down into, like, the story steps, and I would like to try that.
Well, you mean I believe that storytelling is not just for the lower levels, obviously. You know, when you're trying to explain something about why does the economy work the way it does, it really is kind of a story format. Well, first this happens and then this, and so they're sequencing. So it's putting that academic language in some sort of sequence for them so they can just add to it, so they get better at being cohesive, and when they talk or when they write, they have a direct point and a purpose to writing, and they just get better at that. So I'm just a firm believer in just teaching storytelling as a format for all levels, because basically that's a skill that we all should have. When we go on a website, it's like, why should I follow your blog? Why should I even read anything about you? Well, you tell a story. This is my story about who I am. How do you sell a product? Well, you want it because somebody's told you a story about why it works so well, something like that. So just bear that in mind maybe for the upper levels as well, because I think that AP test, when you have some kind of format in mind when the kids are retelling something in their own words, they're kind of telling that same kind of format. So I think everybody can learn from it, obviously, because I'm always telling stories like, "What'd you do this summer?" Right? "Oh, I was on a hangout." "Well, what'd you do?" I'm trying to tell some kind of story of what I learned. So that's
So
just a caveat of it.
over in our Q&A section, we did have one question, and Angela has joined us now, my homie from Gaston County. And she said, how do you create proficiency-based notebook that is not grammar and vocabulary? Angela, would you say that's pretty much answered your question at this point, or is there something else that you would like to know more about? She's muted at the moment. She might be frozen.
No, I'm not frozen. I just had it muted.
Can you
I have a
repeat that
kitty
question?
cat talking.
Okay.
No, that answered the question.
All right. So we're done that way. Don't have a lot of Q&A questions today. So we talked about what goes into an interactive notebook. And we sort of hitting on like how we can use it for like the interpretation and stuff like that. You guys have any more ideas on what would be some good things to put into an interactive notebook?
That was my second question.
I wanted to jump in here again as well, and I just have an example from the English side of things from the interactive notebook that I purchased, and that is when you really you're organized, what it should look like is more of what the screenshot is showing, and that is you have your table of contents, and then kids can go back and forth and know, okay, what was that again? What was figurative language? Okay, you turn to page 11 or whatever that is. And so that's where the foldables come in, I believe, and where they can tab it so they can quickly get to it. So as you're looking at that table of contents, one thing you can look at is, as a teacher of Spanish 2, for example, what are the things you want them to know that they would always want to have in the notebook? So that would be one thought I'd have. Maybe those are the I can statements. Maybe they're an overview of what we're going to be able to do. Maybe it's what the exam is going to look like. So I'm going to have to be able to sustain a conversation about what I did this summer, for example, and that would be maybe on that page, and it has some tips for that. So
I do want to point out that like I was kind of lax with the table of contents upkeep the first semester I tried it, and that was a major mistake. So it really does help to keep the table of contents going, and it gives them kind of a guidance for what they're doing.
So while we're on the subject of table of contents, too, I had my students keep one, and one of the biggest issues I ran into was I had not planned well enough. So I have my students for the whole year, Spanish 1 in the fall, Spanish 2 in the spring, and by the time we were getting to May, I was like, I don't think they're going to have enough.
I'm sorry, 1 second. Marquetta, would you mind muting your computer while you're not talking? There's some background noise that's interfering with her speaking.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Let's see if that takes care of that.
Okay, so yeah, I was not organized, and then I almost had the students run out of space. So I found something for cleaning up the pictures that I'm going to have to find again and link, but a planning document for teachers that just has a little space up to what there are 200 pages in a composition notebook, so that my goal is to at least plan, I don't know, maybe 20 pages in advance at a time, so I don't find myself in a situation where they've run out of space in their notebooks, and where I'm also being very purposeful about what they put in their notebooks. Because another thing I realized is that sometimes I'd be like, oh, let's just put this in your journal, in your interactive notebook, without really thinking about whether or not it was serving the purpose of the interactive notebook. So that's one way to keep organized, is to have a teacher table of contents before the students even make theirs.
On the other hand, I think there's a valuable thing to try and jump in and just do one before you have a clear vision. It's going to be a big mess the first time, but I think it is also I think to expect to be able to have your table of contents perfect the first time would be over ambitious, and you might
Somebody's
hurt
been
yourself.
reading Make It Stick.
Well, also I speak from experience, because like now I'm like making the I've got 10 pages planned out for next year already, but I could not have done that last year without having experimented with first. So like I want to encourage people to give themselves the freedom to muddle around for a little bit, but then go back and do like Rachel said, and plan out what needs to be in there. And that was the advice that my gurus gave me too, is to go through and just try something, like just stay a page ahead of them. And that's a good way to just kind of dive in and get a feel for it. It won't be, a panacea the first time, and won't cure everything and save everything, but if you have tried it, then you have a frame of reference. It's kind of like how they made us do student teaching, because if we hadn't student taught, we would have been totally screwed, We had to have someone there to guide us. So we do have another question in the Q&A. Viviana says, did y'all share tips already? Glue sponges will save your sanity. Aha, back to the glue. Glue sponges. And I'm considering multiple single subject notebooks this year. Weight issues with backpacks. So, again, let's talk school supplies. We're teachers. We love it. I personally do use a composition notebook too, and as the guru suggested, they went out and bought one set of composition notebooks for all the classes and then said, all right, you owe me a notebook now. So everybody had one from the first day. I'm not very good at keeping up with getting those back, so I'm probably going to drop in another $20 at Office Depot come school supply time. But what are some other tips for having a sturdy, safe notebook now that we've moved on from glue? Do you guys
interject for a second here?
Yeah.
I did the same thing as you did, and I supplied the first set of notebooks out of my pocket and was able to, kind of go halvesies with my students. They chipped in 50 cents, and I was able to get the school to pay for the other 50 cents for the second trimester. But as far as organizing, like I think it's Rachel that, I was kind of going by the seat of my pants too, but one thing that kept me in check was on the very first page, when they open it up, it's a page that says, c'est moi, or this is about me, and they kept a running kind of log, like a resume of themselves. So every time we learned something, they'd have to add it to that page. So we did the meet and greet first, and then how old you are, and then describing yourself, and then your likes and your dislikes. So every time I checked their notebook, I could kind of see what I was teaching and if it was kind of in some kind of sequential form. And so that kind of helped me out. And then by the end of the trimester, they should have at least 20 to 30 sentences about themselves. And then part of the interpersonal or presentational would be for them to ask, they had to know the questions to ask somebody else in the class to get that answer. So then there was an interpersonal component there. And that worked out really well. And then we'd have practice time where they'd walk around and ask everybody questions about, and they'd have their answers right there. So I don't know if I can get a picture of it. So I'm still trying to figure out how to do that.
Patty, if you can't get the...
There it is. So we just did it like that. And then we kept going all the way down. Of course, I didn't keep up as well as the students did. But, and then they could add their cute little tabs in here wherever they wanted. But there are some foldables in here too that I found. But that was a really good way to keep in check for me to stay in line and know what was going on.
I like that. So it's like an example of each of the things that they tried in real brief on there.
Right.
Love that. And I noticed that you use spiral notebooks, and Viviana's offering another tip too. She says duct tape the spirals to keep them from getting tangled. So if you're not using composition notebooks, definitely. And actually, I got an excuse to get my cute little duct tapes, and like I would just put a little duct tape tab on each of their notebooks so that I could split up the classes easy. So like one class was the red with the polka dots, and one class was the pickles, so that they could find themselves really easily too.
Well, I didn't let my students take them out of the classroom unless they were really good about bringing them back, because one of the reasons why I started this was because everyone would forget their work. They'd leave it in their locker. So I had a file cabinet, one drawer for each class. They put it in there, And half my students, you know, I'm not even sure where they're spending the night, so I just let them have a file in the drawer there, and in the weekend or before a quiz, if they wanted to take them home, they could. They realized how important it was and how much work was in it and how much it was worth. So, so I think that's why the spiral notebook worked, because it wasn't being carried around all day, every day, where it would, you know, get messed up.
So there are some arguments for keeping them in the classroom, particularly if they are processing the information and they have that in their heads rather than in the notebooks. But I do like the checkout system. Like if my students wanted to take theirs home, they wanted to keep working on something, or they wanted to use something to do their portfolios or something like that, then they would write their names on the board with their notebook. So that's one way to do it, but it's not the only way, of course. Linda has chimed in with a Q&A. I think that processing that occurs as students work in their interactive notebooks is valuable. I'm still concerned about the amount of class time taken to create all these products. Any suggestions? What do you guys think about the class time?
Yeah, it does take a lot of time to process, especially if you have 30 kids in your classroom and they're all cutting out. So sometimes after school, I would speed up the process by cutting everything to size and then just handing it out. And that was amazing. I mean, they still had to glue it in, but it did save a lot of time of cutting, you know, and I purchased my own paper cutter, and that helped a lot. It really did to do that.
I think the two things for me with regards to class time, the first thing is to remind students to not be perfectionists about it, and that these are their personal notes and I'm going to see them. But other than that, I just simply don't let a student take 20 minutes to cut and glue something because they're just overthinking it. But then the second thing for me was having to really be like, you know what, this took 15 minutes longer than I expected, but it was worth it. Because I think the thing about interactive notebooks that Laura was saying before is that it's the process of creating them where the learning is really happening and where it's really sticking with them. And so it does take longer, but I began to realize after about a month of doing interactive notebooks that taking that extra time was actually helping them retain the material.
Bravo.
Another thing I think is the opportunity for target language instructions, because they're reinforcing the same things over and over. Like, so my kids know corta de no tijeras, and you know, like they have a very basic vocabulary, which is essential to for a jumping off point. And so like they're getting a fluency with the vocabulary that I'm using to.
Well, yeah, I understand that. That's true.
It's an opportunity for you to use simple target language that everybody can latch onto, especially at the lower levels. And you could get more complex with fancier foldables for the higher levels too. Angela had a question: do you add notes the students take in class? It is their notes for me. I don't know about you guys, but like if I want them to take notes, then it's a page in the notebook, and it's made me be a lot more purposeful about that. Do you need this written down? All right, we're getting at sacando los cuadernos, and it's time now. So, and we have to be able to label it with something. So it's made me be very purposeful about the notes that they do take, because it does go in there. If they take additional notes, hopefully, like I'll be able to direct them to a page that they should be adding on to if it's not a new concept. What about you guys?
I do exactly what you say too. Everything that's written has to be. They just write everything on the right side, and all the foldables and little conversation grids and everything go on the right side. So they pretty much know that everything's going to be written in there. And if they want to write more, I'd say, well, overflow into the margins on your left side if you have to. But they really, I mean, some of them really did just a beautiful job in the process, like you say, in using the directions in the target language. it's all part of a really great process. I wouldn't go back to, the other way in the book and all that.
Viviana has another suggestion. She says we set the timer and make it a game to beat the timer. I think I'm going to start doing that because the ones who want to trim every little piece off, oh my gosh, I'm strangling. So fabulous prizes if you can get done before the beeper stops. I like that.
I
Linda also
actually use timers. I do use a timer to do it, and the reward is, believe it or not, these little stupid stickers that I got off of Amazon. There's 5,000 for $3, and they want the sticker in the notebook. They think that this sticker means something more than it does. It just means they beat the timer. But it worked, and it kept them on task.
nice.
Could that be part of like a gamification type thing? Because I think that's a wonderful idea. Even the little stars, if you had a seating chart and you put stars, you gave them stars, and I mean, the Twitter's all about the gamification and the badges and the icons, and if they reach so many levels, then they get some kind of prize or something. I think that's a wonderful idea.
They got, if you got 20 stickers during the course of a unit per se, it was 1 bonus point. And they fought for 1 bonus point like crazy.
Me gusta.
That's great. I love that.
Linda has another question. She says, in order to help students with processing material as they are creating, how do you manage keeping students focused on processing and not just absentmindedly cutting, coloring, etc.? That's a very good question. What do you guys do?
That's what I struggle with. That's my biggest struggle, I think. Because I had so many kids that were so almost OCD about things, and they had to be perfect, and if it wasn't perfect, they needed to start over. And so it started to become more about what they're looking at and how it looked than what they were actually trying to learn.
And so some students do have that hang up. I think the timer should help with some of that, but also like the pre-activity, post-activity kind of things, so that if you've got them timed, they've got the set amount of time to get their prettiness done. Like if you set up what it is they're doing, refresh what it is they've done, I think the emphasis will still be there. Like another book that I was reading last year was something about why do kids hate school or something, and it's like, oh well, when they're doing all these projects, they're doing baking to learn about Shakespeare or whatever, then they remember the baking, but they don't remember the Shakespeare, and I think it's a fine line we tread with that. So I think it probably just has to do with where you put the emphasis before, during, and after, along with the timer and the stickers.
I found that I had some of those OCD type kids that just wanted everything to look perfect, and they would check out their notebook to take it home and make it look really perfect. And then I discovered that some of the other kids would feel bad, so I usually would, like on a Friday, give them 15 or 20 minutes if I had some extra time, and I'd say, okay, just catch up on your notebook, make it look the way you want to look, because I'm going to look at them this weekend.
See, I've done that before.
Sometimes I didn't, but, gave them 15 minutes to catch up, and those people that are already caught up, I gave them like extra verbal activities to do, or extra activities or foldables to put into their notebook to play around with.
All right. Well, we have just a short amount of time left. Anyone want to get some last minute questions or ideas in? Takeaways?
I have a question. Just about how you all keep, like, a lot of students like something to refer back to, so if a student misses a day and that kind of thing. So Laura, I know you mentioned that you take an example picture to put on Evernote, and I was wondering what others do. I tried to keep an example journal going, worked for, I don't know, until October, and then I just couldn't do it anymore, and the students were like, where's the example journal? So ideas on that would be helpful.
Okay, I have this one little sheet I'm going to show you. Besides, on the weekends, sometimes I would steal some of the best notebooks, and then I would catch mine up to try and look like that one. But I have this. I would type one of these up that showed the right side and the left side, and then I would stick that in there after so many weeks. and this would be all the things that they should have in there. And then I would staple that in there at the end of wherever. I would give this to them ahead of time so that they could maybe work on their table of contents, but they knew that like they were going to get a point for each one of these. So this was like at the end of 6 weeks maybe.
I have had them, and this kind of answers Linda's question that she added to the Q&A too. Do you assess the notebooks in any way? And one time when I was absent, I left a similar checklist to what Patty just showed us, and I had them look at each other's and compare that way to get them set up. So I'm all for anything that you can get the students to do for you to do that. So like I had them check each other. I wasn't there, it didn't work the best. Maybe you guys can build on that.
I think the table of contents, you know, if you give them one day, they all are adjusting their table of contents, comparing their table of contents with each other, get in small groups. And I didn't give points for any completed work unless it was in the notebook, and then it was just 1 point. I didn't give more than 1 point for anything. So if they, you know, they had their daily 3, which is weather, date, and day, and the cultural topic for the day. I gave them a point for that, but they just knew that because we didn't have a lot of tests, we just had the interpersonal type things going on.
Correct. That's what I would do. I'd let my kids know, like, hey guys, just let you know the notebook fairy might be showing up this Friday or next Monday. So, and that would kind of give them the idea of to check their table of contents. And plus, I also had an example notebook that kept me in check, and so they knew where it was, and so that, you know, Sarita, can I borrow your notebooks? Sure. And so they'd go and compare. And any foldable that we did or any handout, I had a file like on my counter where they'd go and look for any extra handout or whatnot, or if they've lost it because they didn't glue it in or something like that. And so that's how I would always check mine. I'd give them a heads up, hey guys, notebook fairy's coming sooner or later, and that'll kind of get them in check. And then I'd hate staying in my classroom, so I would bring them home to study because my kids, they can bring their notebooks in and out until it's time for the notebook fairy to show up, and they knew to keep their notebooks in their class box for the weekend, so that way I can grade their notebook.
Yeah, I tried to do like a weekly check at one point, and that didn't happen for very long. And it was just a question like, do they have it? Like, is it there? Is it complete? And then I would just kind of like highlight things if they had done it wrong, so they go back and fix it. I quit checking, and they kind of noticed, they kind of didn't. So like they just had to have it in order to do the next step. So like I'm trying to get away from grading everything. So by the end, no, I didn't grade. I didn't assess them.
I think with the little ones, it's important that that it doesn't end up being just a notebook full of worksheets, and that they actually are interactive. I mean, for me, that was really important. It's not something that we do every day.
So like that was its own motivation, maybe.
Right, right, yeah. So there's not just a worksheet, another worksheet that you just glue on a piece of paper. It had to have a purpose, some type of interaction.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I did with our notebooks in terms of grading or thinking about how to make it more purposeful was before we would have a test, because in our county you have to have so many quizzes, so many tests. What I would do is I would have them get out their notebooks, and based on the work that we had done for that unit, the students created their own review using their notebooks. They had to do so much oral, so much written, so much reading, and create a practice, and then they would complete it the next day in class with their partners. So that's kind of how we did it. But if they didn't have all the pieces of the notebook, then they couldn't create the review.
Right, and a lot of my notebook pieces were things they could use for their portfolios to show their different can-do statements and stuff too, so that was helpful. We're about at the end of our time. I just wanted to let Myra know about a little fangirl moment that happened in the Q&A. Says, can Myra see this? I love Tumba and Vampirata. Sorry, fangirl moment. Can't wait to start Agente Secretos from Viviana Tracy. So, Myra's got fans. I'll get it. All right. Any final thoughts before we log off and put this one in the archives?
It was great. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. We'll put this up. And if you have some resources, again, please do link them on Google Communities. We've got our interactive notebook section, and then everybody can continue learning, perhaps with the YouTube videos, Pinterest pins if you come up with some good stuff. And let's keep learning. Tomorrow we will have a hangout at 8 p.m. on rubrics and feedback. All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.
Uh,